Welcome to In the Reads, the podcast of San Jose State University's Read Magazine, California's oldest literary journal. I'm Peggy Pollard. This episode, I'm interviewing author Kathryn Trueblood, winner of Read Magazine's issue 158, Gabriel Rico Challenge for Nonfiction, with her winning entry, Blank Spaces, Black Frames. It tells the story of the author's mother choosing to end her life by voluntary stopping of eating and drinking. The contest-winning story was chosen from 3 finalists by our celebrity guest judge, Suzanne Rico, the judge for the Gabriel Rico Challenge for Nonfiction. She wrote, Blank Spaces, Black Frames is a sharp, insightful look into the life of a mother struggling to embrace her own ending, and the daughter who observes it. Even when her mind begins to fail, this mother kept some control by writing in her calendar and on Post-it notes the record of a woman reminding herself she is loved. And then came the startling ending. The essay just stopped. At first I couldn't believe it, but then I realized that the story went blank and there was such quiet power in that choice. Kathryn Trueblood has been awarded the Goldenberg Prize for Fiction, the Red Hen Press Short Story Award. Her work is situated firmly in the medical humanities. Her books include Take Daily as Needed, The Baby Lottery, and The Sperm Donor's Daughter. Trueblood's stories and articles have been published in Poets and Writers magazine, the Bellevue Literary Review, Medical Literary Messenger, the Los Angeles Review, Glimmer Train, the Seattle Review, the Examined Life, and others. She's a professor of English at Western Washington University. Welcome to In the Reads podcast, Kathryn. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you very much.
Would you like to read a sample from Blank Spaces, Black Frames?
Sure, absolutely. It has a little preface. This is what the spaces say. Robert L. Root. The doctor says she is exiting the window of capacity. The doula says the window of capacity is closing. Capacity refers to my mother's ability to make decisions and consistently recall what her decisions mean. Each little box of my mother's calendar looks like a window of capacity to me. Some days it feels as though she is tipping headlong out a window while I hold her by one ankle. Microscopic brain bleeds wash her memory away. It's odd how my memory works now, she says to me. I see a white space, and then a picture drops into place. We use the calendar every morning to measure the distance between today and the date my mother will start VSED. Voluntary stopping eating and drinking. Deciding to die requires its own set of markers. The doula has us create a list so we can eventually answer the question most often on my mother's mind. How will I know when it is time to VSED? These are the things that my mother says give her identity and meaning. Living independently, walking my dog, cooking for myself, reading my books. When she can no longer do these things, it will be time. I don't read my books the way I used to, my mother says, her hand open expansively towards her bookshelves. But I read around in them. Just so long as it gives you pleasure, Mom, I say. I use my mother's daybook to count backwards from the number of pills in the memantine bottle to the number of days since the prescription was filled. I discover she has been taking 2 pills some days and none on others. Billy Pilgrim has come unstuck in time, I say to her, hoping she will recognize the line from Slaughterhouse-Five. She laughs. The wheels on the bus are falling off. She has used so much whiteout that her calendar has texture, which is fitting for someone who studied painting. Items are circled, lines drawn between them. Notes about who will walk the dog, get the hearing aids fixed, take her to the neurologist. And there are notes about what happened, who came to visit, and who called. Kate did shopping for me, exclamation point. Daisy here with ice cream, exclamation point. Frank phoned, long visit. Right foot numb, vertigo. Andrew has my car, reminder. Headache, left side. Bayard to check on me, exclamation point. It is the record of a woman reminding herself she is loved.
Thank you. That is so beautiful. And first, I want to say I am sorry for the loss of your mother. That's a huge life trauma.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
How long ago was that?
2020, so right in the height of COVID.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, complicated it.
Yeah, a lot of complications. And it's kind of what strikes me the first about this is just how practical it is, how non-emotional,
Hmm.
and we I've seen a fair number of nonfiction stories about end of life journeys, but this one just had the tone of the story was so matter of fact, so unnostalgic. So can you tell me a bit about that of you? Why did
Yeah,
you feel like you wanted to write it this way?
the story is really visual for me. Um, so window of capacity, just that language is metaphorical, even though it's medical language. So there's a window and it contains capacity. Containing capacity is containing a blankness.
Mm,
And my mother keeps using whiteout inside these little squares, which are her calendar. And she writes ultimately on the calendar, she writes, go into a coma because she wants to do everything right. And and then she's using whiteout. And the whiteout is sort of the coma, like she's going to ultimately step off the
mm,
calendar and into a whiteout. And
mm,
so there's just this constant visual part of it. Another part of it is coming home and finding her. She liked white bedding, white sheets, white bedspreads, white quilts. And so she's lying in this black frame and a white bed. So there's this way in which I just keep seeing her contained in this sort of floating space.
mm,
So that's one reason the story is written that way. And another is, I think partly my training. I really love Joan Didion, who um, was very restrained about emotion. She put really hard contrasts. That's what she put things right up against each other to create emotion, to create commentary, but she
mm,
didn't allow herself to have any commentary otherwise. And I think in a sense I had to write this book this way because I had so much emotion I was just going to go under if I started having any at all. And
mm.
I wanted the reader to move towards the material. And the material is so heavy, that I felt like I had to stay out of it in a way to let the reader move towards it.
And that seems like that is very hard to do when you're writing about your own family.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's interesting to you that you just felt it so strongly that you had made a decision to not to not express your emotions that much, that even if at all.
I think there's more emotion sort of in part two, which is post, after her death,
Mm,
kind of postpartum. There's more once you start doing how the family is coping with all of this, then there's more, I think, overt emotion
mhm. Yeah,
in the
'cause
book, the larger book I've written. But we're speaking now just of the story, which has been honored with this award.
and congratulations for it too.
I'm thrilled. Thank you.
It was quite a process of going through, and your story really stood out. And just Suzanne Rico saw the value of it.
I really appreciate that because when I'm a writer of a certain age and I'm writing a tough subject matter, and I think, sometimes it's easy to despair and think nobody's going to love my ugly child,
Oh,
so to
we
speak.
love it. We all love it, and now
Thank
more
you.
people will love it too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it is something that a great many people are facing, and we're facing it
Mm,
alone a lot of the time, or we perceive that we are alone because it is not in the vernacular. It's not in the conversations we're having.
right. So, why did you feel like it was important to write about this story now at this time in our society?
Well, baby boomers we're just a huge number, but we are in increasing numbers facing death in all kinds of ways. And I think that our culture, we're capitalistic, and increasingly I think that people feel like the only option they have is assisted living
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of things. And assisted living is run 70% by corporations.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
So when my mother and I went to the neurologist, right, for her to get this kind of final diagnosis of dementia, that's all he had in his waiting room were the assisted living um, pamphlets. So, um, and she kind of had a testy standoff with him because she wasn't going to go into assisted living.
Mm.
And
Your
and
mom
he
sounds like a tough person.
she was a little
Respect
firecracker.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
she
had
wasn't
one too.
she's yeah, yeah, exactly. She said, I'm not, this is not, and he said, I have never participated in helping someone die. I'm like,
Mm.
dude, you're shipping everybody out. You are too doing it, you know?
Wow, wow.
Um,
Mm.
so it wasn't until we found ourselves, I found myself because I was really trying to figure out how I was going to help her, knowing that she was very, very strong-willed. So she meant what she said.
Mm.
And all of a sudden I didn't know where do I turn? And I was lucky because there had been a workshop at my church, because a woman there, Phyllis Schachter, had written about her husband's decision to do this. And because
Mm.
the Pacific Northwest is a kind of a frontier still in mentality, and people were undertaking this as a choice.
Mm.
Um, it's kind of
Interesting.
long, but the way the law is written so you can have medical aid in dying is legal, right? It's not legal in every state. I think at that time, there were 7 states where it was legal. So that means you can have the lethal cocktail, right?
Mm.
But the way it's written, it says that you have to be 6 months from the end of life and in your right mind as determined by 2 doctors. But if you have a neurological disease, right, which causes any kind of change to your mental state, you aren't going to be determined to be in your right mind by 2 doctors. And they
Oh.
aren't going to know when the end of your life is going to be. They won't be able to say that with any certainty. So people with Parkinson's, MS, dementia, Lou Gehrig's, all of them can't have medical aid in dying, the cocktail.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's a wide swath of people who, and my mother was one of them, who have to figure it out themselves.
Mm. Wow. And so what does that tell you? How do you see the American medical system and how we deal with death? I mean, what is this incident,
Oh,
this
I
aspect
was
of it?
mad. I mean, I felt like it was, state mandated that my mother suffer, and that we as a family, in a way, we had to choose for her to do an early death. We would have liked to have spent more time with her,
Mm.
but in order for her to remain within the state guidelines for competence, she had to make this choice sooner than she wanted to.
Oh, wow, interesting. So it actually pushed her to in a direction that you feel like wasn't
Yeah,
ideal.
yeah, that's
Mm.
yeah. I mean it it made me an activist when I wasn't one, you
Oh,
know.
okay.
So um it's it's a difficult subject, and each person has to make their own choices. But I think that right now, um, with the expense, what it costs to do assisted living and nursing homes. I mean, if you read Atul Gawande's On Being Mortal, you realize that most Americans die in a medicalized way. They die in a hospital or they die in a nursing home,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
unless you make provision not to.
with great expense. And
Hmm.
do you see it as prolonging suffering rather than, dying with dignity,
Yes.
those issues? Hmm.
Yeah, I've had friends whose parents have been through some of these routes and said that we are kinder to our animals.
Ah, mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's a pretty rough statement.
it's the American medical system is a very big topic that I'm,
It's
I'm
a huge topic.
interested in, and
It's a huge topic, but
this is, yeah.
yeah, we don't treat death as a natural process.
Hmm.
It gets treated as something to fix and avoid, and you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fix. I don't think they've totally fixed death yet, but a
Yeah.
lot of money is spent on it, and I think, yeah,
Yeah.
some that where if the system is set up to, it's not incentivizing the dying with dignity that,
Even it's just
helping
not, yeah,
people.
it's not, I mean, even like the discussions, people don't even seem to know about hospice or that they have hospice,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and what it is. It just seems like, um, anyway, that was, I found in all circumstances that my mother was expected to go into assisted living.
Mm-hmm.
And that when she made the choice not to, that opened up this, I will say, this world opened up of just wonderful human beings who
Mm,
had themselves been shaped by some kind of life-altering experience and who had decided to become a part of this supportive community of helping people leave the planet in a way they wanted to. But
mm,
until you go and knock on that door, you don't know it's there. You know, there are the,
yeah.
not like the nonprofit End of Life Washington was one. Um, uh, Northwest Resources or VSED Resources Northwest is another one, and there's just a lot out there
Yeah,
when you start looking.
I had not heard about it until I read your story. And can you tell me what it was like for you and your family when to learn about it, and did your mother find out about it herself, or how did you
Um,
all learn about it?
yeah, because I found out about it through I went to a workshop because there was a workshop through my church. I just kind of drifted into it,
Mm.
and then at my university, there's also an organization called Palliative. It's a palliative care institute. And then I went to some of what are called death cafes.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, death cafes are just
Yes.
people getting together, another nonprofit. Death cafes, people get together to talk about what their end of life options are.
Hmm. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were the one who learned about it first in your
So
family?
I knew my mother was tough as nails and was
Yeah.
not gonna, so I felt like I had to help find her some options. And the book has this, the longer book has this section that's where it's really quite desperate. I felt like a true desperado trying to find, you know, and remember it's COVID. So like there's
Mm.
this Compassion and Choices is the organization that the Hemlock Society became. And they will fly they'll fly into your city or your state to help you if you make a choice through them.
Oh,
But
wow.
during
Okay.
COVID, they weren't flying.
Ah, okay. So it's tougher to get resources. Wow.
Yeah, and it was tougher for me to communicate with my family what my mother's choices were.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
I felt like people were questioning whether I influenced her. And I don't know if that hasn't permanently damaged some of my family relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So not everyone in the family was unanimous about it the same way. I
No.
can, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And my
how did,
mother was afraid that someone would try to stop her,
hmm.
so she wouldn't tell them.
Mhm.
So she left it up to them to find out later and for me to tell them.
Mm. Can you tell me more about your mother?
Yeah.
What was she like before this end of life journey?
Um, well, she was a character.
And did you inherit any of her spunkiness?
Yeah.
I'm gonna sense that you
Yeah.
did.
She was not a rule follower.
Mm.
Um, my mother, I mean, she was really wonderful for me as a girl. She was creative and she she wrote for Arts Magazine. She interviewed
Oh, wow.
artists. She was
Oh.
involved with that. So I remember my childhood, I had a lot of interesting people in it.
Mm.
She became a script supervisor, on films, so she kept track
Oh.
of every camera angle and the film footage. And she
Oh.
went, for instance, to New Mexico to work on House Maid of Dawn, which was N. Scott Momaday was the author of that. He was a Navajo, and he won the Pulitzer Prize for the book, and it was the first major Native American film in the U.S.
Wow,
And she
fantastic.
was, yeah, she was the only woman on set besides the makeup lady.
Wow.
Yeah, so she did some wild stuff, and then later, when I was about 16, she moved to Mammoth Lakes to write a biography of Andrea Mead Lawrence, who was a two-time gold medalist in skiing. It was like skiing history. And so she was one of the
Mm.
first people to do women in sports.
Oh, wow. She's a pioneer then
She
in arts
was,
and
she was.
writing.
So,
Fantastic.
and on the
Mm.
other hand, how do I even describe it? I mean, I went to 11 schools. She got married 3 times, then she fell in love with a woman.
Oh, okay.
Just, yes.
She was a renegade, sounds
She was
like.
a renegade,
And
Sometimes she
this,
forgot she had kids, but anyway,
sounds like a decisive person who's just, I'm
very
going to
decisive. Yeah.
do what I want. Spunky. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
spunky.
She always
Yeah.
said to me, she said, it doesn't matter what it looks like on the outside. It matters how it feels on the inside. And that was really one of the most beautiful things, ever.
Wow.
And so, we were
I,
on the one hand, very close. And on the other hand, it sometimes was very hurtful. So, um,
I want to read a lot more about your mom.
yeah, she's in the book. There's a lot more of her. There's a lot
Okay.
more of her in the book. And, so saying goodbye to her, what was beautiful at the very end of her life is she made some very important apologies to me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we
Mm.
really did have,
Mm.
yeah, a coming
For
together.
reconciliation time.
It was extraordinary. Yeah, the kind of thing people want and wish for and, all the rest.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
she had extraordinary insight as a
Oh,
human
wow.
being.
So
So I
she
use. Mhm.
used the time to give a closing to her story in her
She did. She was
relationships.
very aware of that. And I use some of her journals in the book. It's hybrid. I use some of her because there were just some things that really spoke to me to bring her voice into it.
Mm. Wonderful. And for those listening, her book is The Big Ask, a memoir, which is coming out. Is it
My book
soon
is
or?
seeking a publisher. It's with somebody getting read right now. So think good
Oh,
thoughts because I
okay.
really would like to. It'll see print one way or the other, but
Mm.
right
Mhm.
now I'm seeking.
Wow, sounds like, and I have no doubt that it's going to be very successful. And especially now, the more I learn about your mom and echoing with my mom, I think they would have liked each other
Uh-huh.
actually.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so
Yeah.
that
Well, she
was,
was untreated bipolar, so I
mm,
sometimes have to say that some of her failings, I see her just as somebody who, she was afflicted. You
mhm.
know, she was a very loving mom, but she had some severe storms that rolled through.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm glad you can see it that way, to be able to realize the more you can identify, these labels that are helpful to us to say, oh, she had something she was dealing with that caused her, behavior in
Hmm.
some ways. So, and I'm saying that to myself too of my own mother, but yeah, so
Yeah.
her journey really that speaks to me a lot as well, that I think a lot of people
Well,
can
if
relate
you
to.
are in a family where there's mental illness and it's genetic and it runs through the family, you know, you feel something, if it sets you aside, it makes you feel quite set aside in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just true. And so other stories like that are a boon to read.
Yeah, yeah. And it's good we're talking about it now. Back not that long ago, people didn't talk about it. It was
No,
considered
no,
shameful and
that's
all
right.
that. Yeah.
Well,
So
I think that was, I mean, coming back around to my mother's early experience and the real impetus behind why she did not want to be in an assisted living facility is because she was in a mental hospital
mhm.
in her 20s, in her late 20s. And
Can you tell me more about that? If it's
yeah,
not.
um, well, it was probably 1964, 65. And that was a pretty horrible time in terms of what institutions were like.
Mm,
And also, I mean, I've read Phyllis Kessler's Women and Madness, women who were angry at the social script were often put in institutions like that. And my father was a doctor. It only took two doctors to keep a woman inside. I think that she felt in many ways that he colluded to keep her inside.
Oh,
It
wow.
took a year for her parents to get her back out. She had Thorazine and electroshock. Um,
Mhm.
and I know she had true PTSD from it. I mean, she was 85 years old, and we were in the parking lot of the lawyer office where we were going to get some changes made to her healthcare directive so that that would protect her in choosing VSED. And she turned to me in absolute fear and said, "They're not going to lock me up, are they?"
Mm. Mhm.
So she was marked by it.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
she said that was her whole feeling. She knew that in assisted living, and especially in a memory care unit, they would lock the doors.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
we were sitting watching the news at night where, because of COVID, people were forced to stay in their rooms all day.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Tough time. And
yeah,
so that sounds like that affirmed to you. I mean, that with given all that for you to say, yeah, let's do it mom's way and to respect her with this. Um,
yes. I
mm,
was lucky. My brother was really very much, he was stalwart. He was by my side, and both of us felt we had to respect her.
mhm.
We would, it, we both just felt that if we hadn't, she would have just been frightened and angry for the rest of her life in an institution.
Yeah, I think you did the right thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
You mentioned church involvement. How does your view of the end of life, was there any conflict with your spirituality in making this decision for your mom, or or do you see it as being consistent with that?
Yeah. Um, there was, uh, there was not for me a conflict there. Um, you know, um, my God lives very high in the mountains.
Mm,
And but I had friends, one in particular, people who challenged me, who felt uncomfortable, who said, "You don't have a right to take your own life. Only God can take your life. Only God can say when your life is finished. You're intervening." I
mhm,
mean, I came up against that at a time when I felt pretty fragile, and I just learned. Just stayed loving and had to say I don't think I agree with that, or maybe that's true for your parent and how you felt about it, but um,
mm.
that's not how I feel about it.
And with
So
this particular method, it's not a medical intervention. It's just allowing someone to stop eating, or they're voluntarily stopping eating and drinking so that
there has to be
it's
medical support. There
mm,
has to be. And there is, as I said, I mean, the hardest thing for us is what for us with this was there was not a medical protocol, a firm, clear medical protocol in place, right? You had people across the country trying to figure out how to do this the best way possible.
mm,
We had a nurse on our team. We were so lucky. She had spent 30 some years as a labor and delivery nurse, and she had spent I don't know how many years doing VSED, but it was not, even she said to me afterwards, "I would have put your mother on a subcutaneous morphine pump sooner."
mm,
Okay, so um, there are now clinical guidelines that were just published in 2023 in the Journal of Pain and Symptom Management. But before that, you didn't have clear guidelines. You have to have a medical team on board. You need to have, the organs are shutting down. Dehydration does things to the brain. There can be agitation, there can be hallucinations. You
mm,
need to have lorazepam on board, morphine on board,
mm,
haloperidol on board, and you need to have people who know when to do what.
mm. Okay, so it's kind of the pain management symptom. I guess it's palliative care.
It's palliative care and
Yeah.
hospice. And the interesting thing is like how things have changed. So, in my county, the hospital is Catholic and hospice is associated with the Catholic hospital. So you get all these
Oh,
layers.
okay. Hmm.
Yeah,
The culture of death in America has its own unique aspects, I
it
guess.
does. So hospice basically says we're not, somebody has to be dying for us to come. So you're
Mm,
taking, so maybe on the third or fourth day they'll come because by then this person has been in a state of fasting for long enough, and they were in a fragile state to start with usually because their
mm,
health wasn't great. So then hospice will come, and hospice was great, but they usually wait,
mm. Okay, so it
and
has to
that's why.
triggers when, and people don't want to get blamed. They don't want to have any, lawsuits that said they were at fault for. So that's
Yeah,
tricky to
it's
navigate all this.
it's tricky, and it's tricky. I went to a grief group after, which is in the second half of the book, and it's tricky too, the amount of grief and the amount of guilt that people feel
Mm,
because I mean, essentially, I felt like an event coordinator. I'm running around to doctors and lawyers and doulas and, and
mm,
my mom wants all these things, but she doesn't have the mental capacity to hold all this together anymore. She
And you're
can keep,
wanting to make it as graceful for her at the ending of her life as possible. You're trying to help her and make her
Mhm,
comfortable. So it sounds like
mhm.
it's difficult process for you to go through.
Right. But later you feel it was like it's a huge thing to ask of somebody, and other people are looking at it as suicide,
Mm-hmm.
other people in the family, you know, and you're asking yourself, did I do what was it right? Did I do the right thing?
Hmm.
So it's, I think there's a lot, I think there may be more for people to carry and learn and grieve from, and also figure out sort of how to discharge at the end.
Mm-hmm. Wow, and it seems to me that, I mean, people around the world, most people in the world at some point are going to die or, have died.
Yeah.
And so how they've handled it. And we have so much more end of life um, medical care than like probably any other culture. And is it, that there's so much that maybe is not helpful. But yeah, and so when there's a lot of people who don't have medical care, and so they don't have the choice of, of intervening as much. So they have to figure out how to make it, how to die with dignity within their capacity.
Yeah, I did a lot of reading in the year after, and there were some Canadian people I read because of their palliative care experts and some of how they look at um, this passage, and just really asking myself, like, do you get a life without pain? Do you get a birth without pain?
Mhm.
Do you get to die without any suffering at all? Like, what are our assumptions? I mean, yes, we'd like to minimize things and have it, but I think that we have to look at what our assumptions are. We labor to come into the world, right? And labor is the word we use. And I think we labor to die.
Life is a struggle, no matter what you do. And
Yeah, I don't think you can, that was what I finally came to is like, I think she got what she wanted. She got what she chose. And I don't think she could have been spared everything,
Mhm.
And part of that struggle was her will. She had that kind of willpower where she did not want to let go.
Mhm. I hear you. Yeah, I was there with when my mom passed, and she was a fighter. So
Yes, yes. I guess they say
yeah,
we go the way that we live. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so I'm trying to become very serene.
And I think it's important for you to know that you did your best. You honored her with her choices and did the best
Yes.
you can. It sounds like you worked very hard to, manage things
Yeah.
and do it
Well,
the way that.
the writing was cathartic. Writing this book was cathartic for
Yes.
me. And I thought, like, there are really good, I mean, there's some really good books out there there's the VSED handbook by Kate Christie is great if somebody wants a guidebook. But is there a book about how it feels and how a family goes through it? And, my marriage came apart at the same time at the end of it, right when my mom died. So it's like,
Oh,
all the
sorry.
things that could happen and how does it feel and what was it like to be in that grief group? And like,
Mm,
I just wanted, it's my story. I don't expect it to be anyone else's, but I just thought somebody could think about um, sort of what this let loose. I didn't see any of this coming.
mm. So at what point did you decide to write the story that you gave us so far, the short story, and then the bigger book, of course, was it?
Yeah, that was an early piece. I write as a kind of self-care. So I have a journal and I don't write for publication. I just write because it's my overflow valve.
Mm. It's our emotional palliative care.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
yeah, it feels so
Yes.
good when we get
So
it.
so that was a piece that um and we after my mom died, I was home alone, right? Because it was sort of like this,
Mm.
it was COVID and my marriage had ended and I was home alone and I did a nonfiction class with Jill Talbot, and I think that was one of the pieces I wrote in there. I was just writing these really short, sort of poetic pieces to keep myself going. But it was also like I just had this image of myself in the dark house, with the illumination of the computer and writing each week something. I mean, of course, I was teaching too, but I was teaching on Zoom. So it was that weird sensation of
Wow.
being with people on Zoom all day, but still feeling totally alone every evening, as though I hadn't seen anybody.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's echoing, okay, the title of your piece, Blank Spaces, Black Frames. I'm looking at you right now with the black frame around you on
Yes, you
Zoom.
are.
And yeah, we did a lot of that during
We did
COVID.
a lot. We did a lot of that.
Yeah, it's okay. I bet
Yeah.
there's something metaphor of just her story that you wrote, but that also the whole COVID story.
It is a COVID book.
Yeah.
It's definitely a book about coming out of COVID. And I mean, there's a piece called The Tunnel where I end up skiing in the light, where I feel like I finally have exited the tunnel.
Oh, wow. I am looking forward to this book, and
Thank you.
please get it published quick because
Yeah,
now I'm like,
please. I'll let you
um,
know.
oh, this is
Yeah.
fantastic. Wait, going
Yeah.
through COVID, this is
Yeah.
her passing
Yeah.
in a way that she grabbed a hold of it, and there was a lot of people that passed during COVID,
Right.
and there's such a beauty to that. As you talked about, life is a struggle, death is a struggle, no matter how you do it, and that is part of dying that we are meant to, experience.
Yeah. Yeah. A
Y-
lot more feeling of acceptance of suffering.
And now that we're out of COVID, is there things that still apply as far as what you learned through that experience that just apply to life, human life in general?
Well, I think the question is so huge because of what's happening right now. And I was thinking about, I mean, I teach the things that I teach, how am I shaped by my mother's experience? I mean, I teach The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, and I have taught for a long time One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and James
Great story.
Baldwin's work. And, all of these are looking at and saying, don't get caught in the teeth of the machine.
Mm,
And, and, there are a lot of ways of fighting against, uh, if not patriarchy, totalitarianism. And then I'm looking at where
mm,
we are right now and feeling just so, um,
mm. Yeah.
yeah,
Do you feel like people are looking for they're looking for ways that are painless? They want to have the easy way. I want to just follow what this patriarchal figure is telling me, who's going to solve all our problems, and that seems so easy. And perhaps it's
yeah,
that
we're going to have to do a whole lot of standing up and bearing witness if we want to preserve our democracy.
mm, I agree
And
with you then.
that's
Yeah.
what's been on my mind more than anything. It's funny how all of the other things that mattered to me at one time a lot more um, seem to have shrunk, you know?
Mm,
Yeah.
mhm.
I just have to keep um, I'm teaching young people and I feel like I have
There's
to
an opportunity for you to uphold democracy in your corner of the world.
Right.
That's a
And
powerful way.
to let them know that, right, I mean, I was down at the federal courthouse a week ago, like it's like the young people need to know, if I
Mm,
can keep doing it, you can keep doing it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And for me,
that,
more than anything, it's not partisan at all anymore. It's like, do you like having, education department, Social Security? Yeah, these things I mean, w- I'm a teacher for everyone, and especially because I've worked with veterans a lot too. I just have stayed out of any party politics as a teacher because don't want to, I don't want to go there. And
mm,
so, but this is a sea change, this moment that we're in, and so.
mm. Yeah, you're writing about your mother's passing. That's such a normal part of life that you cannot change. Everybody's going to die at some point,
Mhm.
and how we handle that. And there's truths that come out about the ending of life that tell us about the meaning of the life that we've lived
Well,
in
sure. It's
between.
about the corporatization of dying is very much, there's a protest of that in the book, and there's a taking back and back into the home that's
Mm,
going on in the
mhm.
book that's got a political message.
Yeah, normalizing that death is a part of life and to do it as a continuation. Do you
Yeah.
have any regrets about the process, how things were handled, or?
You know, I had this, I had a wonderful conversation with the doula, such a candid person. And she was the one who said, I wish that we'd gotten your mother on the morphine sooner. I wish we'd gotten your mother, on the um, anti, it's the Haldol, the Halperidol, the anti-agitation, anti-hallucination, hallucinatory drugs sooner. Um, and I don't have regrets in the way of, like, oh, there's something went wrong. And
Mhm.
I just feel like every single person was making the best judgment call they could make in the moment with the information that they had. And, we were pioneers doing the best that we could,
Mm. So it sounds like
frankly.
that
And yeah, I think
affirms this.
my mother, yeah, she may have endured some in order to forward the knowledge base that ultimately is helping other people, and that resulted in these articles being written that do provide guidelines that are very clear.
Mm. That affirms that it was the right thing to do, and you could
Yeah,
even learn,
been a
build on
little bit,
that.
I wish those things could have been different, but
Mm. Mhm.
um,
And it's fitting that she's a pioneer again because she was in her life so many ways. So
that's
even in
right.
her death, she's helping and pioneering a way
Yes.
for other people to be able to follow. That's a lot of good that she's done in the world.
Yes.
So you have a
That's
great mother.
nice. Thank you for bringing that around.
Yeah, and I think you've really honored her in how you handled that and in how you've written this book. I mean, the story that you gave us only 709 words, but it's such a completion of that process.
Mhm.
Yeah, really looking forward to reading your
Mhm.
book, the fuller story about it too.
Thank you, Peggy. I look forward to reading your work that you're going to finish here.
Ah, oh, now I have to finish something. So yeah.
Oh, that's always, I'm writing very light stuff right now.
What would you say that this process that you did with your mother, very much
Mhm.
together, tells us about choices that women, especially American women, have in life? Is there any reflections on that?
My
Goodness.
mother was, she was a bit of a woman warrior. And so, if anything, my nature has had to learn to be softer. So, that's not always a bad thing.
Mm,
Um, I mean, here's the fact. If you are a woman who has a daughter, you are less likely to end up in a nursing home statistically. This is proven. This is true. This is in Tolga Wande's book. That's just crazy that women do the bulk of the caregiving, whether it's to the elderly or to the very young. And my work has pretty much up to now been predicated or looked at the fact that the agenda of the 1970s, the feminist agenda of the 1970s, that we would have state we would have state-funded childcare, and we would have flex time in the workplace, and we would have healthcare, mandated, universal healthcare, all these things that would truly support women in the span of their lives and in the workplace, right? And not one of them has come true, right?
Oh,
And
wow.
that was the
Really?
feminist agenda, first wave agenda, the second wave of the 70s. Okay. So that affects our lives profoundly, and it still affects our lives profoundly. And my story was, I mean, I did the climb for tenure to get tenure
Mm.
in publishing these books. But I also broke my health. I ended up in the hospital. I got Crohn's disease. I got Graves' disease. I couldn't function at this level.
Mm.
I noticed one of your questions was, how did I manage to be prolific and raise children and do all this,
Mm.
or write these books? And I laugh at it now. I wasn't diagnosed with bipolar until I was in my 50s, right? So in retrospect, used to laugh and just think, people used to ask me, how do you do it all? And I should have just said, I'm manic, you know? Because capitalism loves it when you're manic, and
Mhm.
you just keep saying, I can do more and I can do more and I can do more, but
Mm.
I
Mm.
broke in serious ways.
Mhm.
And, I it was pretty exciting to be able to do all that all the time. But you also come down and you're really irritable, and you're pretty hard on the people that you love. And there were reparations that I needed to make to my children and to other people. And I like my life better on lithium. And so that was a big moment for me. And that kind of mental health moment had never happened until this book that I've just written. Like, I had never looked at that. And
Mm.
so
Okay.
that's something really new for me. And it's also really new for me to own it publicly.
Mm.
So
Thank you for your
I don't even know if I answered your question, because I don't remember what it was anymore. But
whatever it was your answer was great. Yeah.
okay,
And thank you for, your honesty and vulnerability and sharing that.
sure.
And so it
Yeah.
sounds like you accomplished a lot of things, but there was a cost to it,
Yes.
to the
Yes.
reality of what the cost is. And
Well, I
yeah.
got a lot of strokes for being manic, is what I found out. Is this, like, everybody
Mm.
loves you when you just keep on going.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
It's kind of like that badge of martyrdom. Women wear that badge of martyrdom
mm-hmm.
at work. People like that.
Hmm. There's a question about American women's choices,
Oh, yeah.
and you can make choices, but knowing what the costs are in those choices, that.
So that comes back to thematically. So American women. And I wrote an essay once again, and Minerva Rising put it out. I called it "Honey, Don't Break Yourself," which was my essay to younger women, saying, don't buy into all of this cultural myth, and in which and you've got kids, and you're trying to do all this. You're trying to climb the ladder at work, and somehow you think all this is possible. It's an impossible thing that you're doing, and you're going to break at some point. And so, don't do it. Don't buy into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I feel sad. I see a lot of young women that I feel like are just, what they're doing is way too hard for anybody.
And to be able to have maybe a different definition of what success is. We want to be successful in all these areas, and it's kind of somewhat not realistic for all of them. So we can still choose, but to say what is our end goal? Is it to have value in our life without necessarily, thinking that it's out there somewhere. It's, to find our.
Right. It's what's intrinsic, and what is it? Yeah. I just say it's, really, everybody should have rest. You should have you should have a nice time with friends, you
Mm.
know.
Hmm.
You should enjoy being with your children. Just that feeling, not that feeling of always scrambling,
Hmm.
always.
That it's never enough. You're not never good enough until you accomplish all these things. And
Right.
where do
Right.
you find the peace?
Yeah,
This is
that there's these lives without any peace at all.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Well, this
Yeah.
has been really great. So I've learned a whole lot from you, and I
Oh,
admire all that you are sharing with us, and how you've been able to share it so well. And thank you. very
Hey,
much.
you gave me the best questions I've ever read, so
Oh,
thank you. Deep.
oh, I did something good.
I
Well,
really appreciate it. You asked me a little bit about students, who students are after COVID,
mm,
and um, and I'll just say a couple things because I love them and they're
oh,
fun. And so my students now were juniors during COVID, and they're very honest. They're the first to tell me that they were doing something else while their teachers were online talking, like playing
shocking.
video games or who knows what they were doing. They were just doing something else.
Oh, wow.
And that basically they said if they even showed up, they got a good grade. And so they tell me that I'm hard, but they're also really grateful because I'm making them learn structure, like whether it's story structure or essay structure, because they have nothing. They just didn't get it. And so they're really cute that way. And at the end of class, and this is something that never happened before COVID, at the end of class, they say, thank you. They all say thank you.
Oh, okay.
And so it's more work than I think it's ever been because I'm having to catch them up.
Mm,
And so it's kind of exhausting. But
mm,
on the other hand, they are very eager.
mm. Well, I
Yeah.
did, when I Googled you, I found Rate My Professor
Oh,
and read through some comments. Pretty
help.
much all of them said you were hard. It was like okay, how much did they like you versus how hard was the class? And almost
Mhm.
all of them, most of them said hard. As expected, you got, well, there's always a range because people have different
Yeah,
expectations,
of
and
course.
you got a lot of top marks. Best professor in the whole university. My
Oh my
favorite
God.
professor. I learned so much, amazing, fantastic. And then, and then there's ones who said she
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
know what she's doing. She's
Oh
like,
yeah.
"Rah, rah, rah." So
I thought this
ignore
class was going to
those.
be easy.
Yeah, right. But they definitely did seem to confirm that it was challenging. You graded hard and you worked them hard. And so I bet they learned a lot.
I give them a lot of the ones that they say hard, but I give them a lot of feedback. So my goal is
Mm.
always to be hard but fair.
Mm, I like that. Yeah, I want to have you as a teacher.
So
Sign
thank
me
you.
up. This has been really great to have you, Kathryn, and thank you for spending your time with us.
A pleasure. Really a pleasure. Fun to
Indeed.
talk about the book.
I am really looking forward to when it comes out. So please prod your publisher to get on the stick and publish it as soon as possible. So find out more about author Kathryn Trueblood's work at www.kathryntrueblood.com. That's KathrynTrueblood, KathrynTrueblood.com. Her new nonfiction book, The Big Ask, a Memoir, includes our 2025 Read Magazine story, Blank Spaces, Black Frames, winner of our Gabriel Rico Nonfiction Challenge. Trueblood's previous fiction novels are Take Daily as Needed, The Baby Lottery, and The Sperm Donor's Daughter. Thanks to our guest, Kathryn Trueblood. This has been In the Reads, the podcast of San Jose State University's Read Magazine, California's oldest literary journal. Find us online at readmag.org. Thanks for listening.